Hey, good morning, everybody. Sorry to start a couple of minutes late. Welcome to this Maricopa County press conference on this late September day. I'm Fields Mosley. I'm the communications director for Maricopa County, also the spokesperson for the Board of Supervisors. So I'd like to thank all the reporters that are out there joining us today to hear this important news about allocating money to a very needed spot in our community, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'd also like to thank members of the community if you're joining us by Facebook or YouTube today to hear this important information. So as many people know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Every year we turn the county administration building purple to recognize this. A lot of our employees, we wear purple on a particular day in October, and certainly recognizing this as a problem in our community. Also, the Board of Supervisors will read and consider a proclamation next week rather, at the regular meeting, as they always do. So, but this year it's a little bit different, and the Board of Supervisors allocated $15 million in June. That was part of the American Rescue Plan funding, and then designated that for domestic violence prevention and services to go out into our community. This is a huge investment in this issue in our community, and it's also addresses a growing problem, unfortunately, that's present in our community right now after so much that people have gone through during the pandemic over the last year. So we have a couple of guests here today to talk about the funding, also next steps. I have Jacqueline Edwards. She is the Deputy Director of our Maricopa County Human Services Department. Also, Jenna Panis, CEO of the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, is with us today to talk a little bit more about that. And I know you want to hear from them and not me, so we'll get to them shortly. A few housekeeping items that I always go through if we're doing one of these virtual press conferences. If you're a member of the media, you'll be, and you have your hand virtually raised out there on the webinar, you'll be asked by our moderator to go ahead with your question, but the secret is you have to unmute yourself on the other side of that. We cannot control your device, so please be unmuted if you have your hand up and want to ask a question at the very end of this. Also, if you're having difficulty, either the raising your hand function is not working or something else about the webinar is not working, you can log out, log back in, and usually that solves the problem. So hopefully we don't have any issues today, but and hope it works well. And with that, I'd like to welcome Jacqueline Edwards here to the studio and welcome her to come up here and say a few words.
In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors has invested over $150 million in human services from the American Rescue Plan Act. This investment is to provide the much-needed support to those individuals and families who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. This includes investments in affordable housing and homelessness, community legal assistance, food assistance, nonprofit assistance, and services for individuals, families, and the community, such as early education, workforce development and support, seniors and persons with disabilities, and domestic violence prevention and support. In regards to domestic violence, the county recognized the serious need in our community, and on August 4th, the Board of Supervisors approved an astounding $15 million for domestic violence support services to be provided through a partnership with the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. I cannot imagine the anguish that the women as well as men have experienced in their domestic and sexual violence experiences, the traumatic disruption to their lives. This crucial funding will be used to provide domestic and sexual violence intervention and prevention in response to the increased need for services as a result of the pandemic, and to reduce family and partner violence and sexual assault. Through this Maricopa County Domestic Violence Reduction Program, we are providing assistance to the domestic violence system and the agencies who ensure the critical safety and support to victims, survivors, and their families. Of the $15 million investment, $5 million is to support the agencies who have experienced funding gaps due to the pandemic, and without these funds would not have the ability to provide services to a significant number of people. Understanding that beyond the physical effects and trauma from domestic violence, the emotional and economic impacts are profound. Therefore, $10 million is specifically for shelter and community-based services, such as counseling, legal services, and financial assistance for survivors. We are honored to be part of and support a systems change resulting in a transition from providing services solely in a shelter-based model to now include a community-based model where survivors of domestic and sexual violence can receive the care they require within their own community. Distribution of these grant funds will be through the partnership with the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, in which they are accepting applications from their member agencies based on the category of assistance. We know that through this significant investment, survivors will be able to receive the much-needed services to heal and ultimately reclaim their lives. I'd like to invite Jenna Panis from the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence to share a few words.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jenna Panis. I'm with the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. The coalition is the statewide agency that really works to end domestic violence and sexual violence within Arizona. We stand with survivors, we amplify their voices, and make sure that our policy leaders and our systems of support here in Arizona truly support what survivors need. We are saddened to share that in 2020, last year, we had 102 lives that were taken from us due to domestic violence. This is one of those visible statistics of how impactful and present domestic violence is, both in our state as well as our community. 60% of those deaths actually occurred here in Maricopa County. We also have the statistic that we know that is a little bit more invisible. And so we know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men are affected by domestic violence. What that means for us as a county is that 770,000 individuals here in Maricopa County are affected by domestic violence. The reason we call this invisible is this isn't necessarily represented in law enforcement reports or in those fatalities, but is rather the day-to-day experience in homes throughout our world. We are so incredibly grateful that Maricopa County has decided to invest these funds into domestic violence services. They're absolutely critical. Like many nonprofits over the 2020 pandemic and continuing, there was a loss of funds to agencies. Services never closed. They stayed open throughout, but infrastructure requirements, loss of funding, really made sustaining those services much more difficult throughout the pandemic. These funds, portion of them, will go to meet that gap, to ensure that those critical and sustainable services are able to continue to serve survivors here in Arizona and in Maricopa County. As Jacqueline mentioned, the additional portion of funds that goes to expand services, really looking towards community-based services, will allow survivors to seek services safely. We realize that shelter-based services and congregate care might not be the most effective way to reach folks, but going and meeting them where they are is critical and is the way that we can continue to meet survivor needs safely throughout the county. Counseling has become an ever-increasing need throughout the pandemic. The increased stress, suicidal ideation, mental health issues, and a lack of trauma-informed counseling have all contributed to increased mental health needs of survivors. And these funds will help that and help meet those and hopefully increase services in that arena. Additionally, specific survivor-based assistance is critical. We all know that women were disproportionately affected during the pandemic with job loss, with lack of security, housing instability, because they were primarily responsible for the care of their children as well as being employed in hourly jobs with less secure schedules, service-based jobs where the economy ended up closing. A portion of these funds is dedicated to specific survivor assistance, to be able to pay rent, to enable survivors to be safe in homes, to allow survivors to leave their abuser and seek a better opportunity, a better life elsewhere. It also provides support for things like exams and job licenses to be able to have survivors seek economic independence and security. Support to be able to move out. Support on healthcare issues. Like, for instance, we recently bought a survivor a new wheelchair because the wheelchair that she had was no longer sufficient to enable her to get around. When people are fleeing abusive relationships, they often leave everything behind. And so being able to step forward with these funds from Maricopa County and be able to meet their individual gaps is critical. These funds from Maricopa County not only meet the gaps in our community, in our members, our services, but also help fill the gaps for survivors. We could not be more grateful to be a partner in this and look forward to partnering with Maricopa County in years and years to come. We invite you to celebrate, or not celebrate, we invite you to recognize Domestic Violence Awareness Month coming up in October with us, and hope that you recognize domestic violence impact in your own lives and support your community as well. Thank you.
So my understanding is we are on YouTube and we are on Facebook right now, but we're having a little bit of trouble with the webinar. So unless I hear differently, we won't be able to do the question and answer period here in the next few moments. Is this so? IT issues are always the fun part of doing a press conference this way. So is the webinar not up? Okay. So if you're a reporter out there, you have further questions for Ms. Edwards or Ms. Panis, we're happy to connect you, get you answers. We also are going to send out a press release shortly with 2 video links in it, and we'll be able to provide that to you so you can see a little bit more if you're interested, and that includes, I believe, a domestic violence victim story as well, so you have a personal connection, this issue, and what we're trying to solve here, if not, or at least prevent and diminish within our community. So with that, unless we can get the webinar going here in the next couple of minutes, I'm afraid we're going to have to cut it off there. If you're working at one of the television stations, you need more sound, you can certainly take it off the YouTube feed or the Facebook feed, and we can also provide that video to you as well, or we can try to arrange interviews after this press conference. So I apologize for that today. We're doing the best we can here with this, but I appreciate your patience, and I hope you found this information valuable. We'll send out some more information via the press release here in just a few minutes. Thank you.